This is one of a kind of a... Yeah, every now and then you come across these car parks where the parking attendant will decide to get a couple of birds. This is the parking attendant that does it. Anyway, right, I'm going to flip this around this way. Oh, hold on. Yeah, so I got into that class, the same old malarkey that normally happens. Had an awful textbook to work with. So what I do is I just open it up to the page of the subject I'm supposed to cover, and I will underline the subject. So for example, today was traditional Vietnamese food, and then I'll just prompt the kids to create sentences. I will write 4 long enough sentences on the board using a variation of adjectives and nouns and verbs, and then of course eliciting all of them. So I get the class to kind of come up with the sentence themselves on the subject. Then we end up with 4 sentences. Then I drill those 4 sentences. Then I start deleting parts of the sentences and I turn it into a game. Long story short, no matter what you end up with in a classroom, whether it's a textbook that makes sense or it's one of these ones that's thrown together by some Vietnamese person who can barely speak English, once you play rock, paper, scissors and have a sticky ball or even a pack of playing cards which you can assign different points to or wild cards to, then you're away in a hack. So yeah, good class, great kids. I enjoyed teaching in that school. What was I talking about before I went in there? Yeah, so when I was living in Lam Van Vien Street, 72 Lam Van Vien Street, I finished up in Apollo after 1 month. The CELTA course was quite an intensive course, to be honest. Kind of like university level, the kind of work that's required when you're approaching your final exams at the end of any heavily loaded academic course that anybody has experienced. A lot of people will say that the CELTA is pretty demanding, considering that once you finish, the only thing you end up doing is like throwing a sticky ball around with a gang of kids. It's about entertainment. It's about motivating the kids, and once you can do that, kind of raise your voice, whistle loudly, jump around like a maniac in front of 60 kids, then you could be an English teacher. And even if you can't, as I said before, once you have the white skin, you're more or less qualified. Anyway, going back to the CELTA, yeah, I did the CELTA, got the certificate, sent out my CV, and within a week I'd say I had a couple of offers. So Christopher Pell had been right all along. It was as easy as that. The place where I had finished my CELTA was the best place for me as far as I was concerned. The money wasn't as good, to be honest, but it had better kind of teacher development, a teacher development system in place. So kind of inbuilt teacher training programs, and it's a school that follows the CELTA curriculum to a T, right? And some schools will just leave you at it, give you a book and expect you to get on with things, and they'll wait until there's some class feedback to decide whether you're a good teacher or not. Whereas other schools like Apollo or ILA, VUS to a certain extent, they will have an academic manager in place whose main job it is to make sure you're following the the Celta approach. As one of my catchphrases seems to be, I'll get into that some other time. Anyway, at that time I started working with Apollo, and I'm in this situation where I'm working 18 hours a week. At first I was only working 12 hours a week. Before you know it, I was working, like between 12 and 18 hours a week, making about 1,300 to 1,500, which is kind of on the lower end of things, but then again, that's what you can expect if you're working 15 to 18 hours. Now, if your rent is $250, you're working 18 hours a week, and the cost of beer is $1 a beer, what do you think is going to end up happening? Drum roll, please. Yeah, that's it. It's a one-way ticket to rock bottom. And I ended up in all the late night bars drinking until 3 or 4 in the morning. The proverbial English teaching scenario where you're paid too much money, you've got too much time in your hands, beer is cheap as water, so you indulge in what you do best. Year one passed by in a bit of a blur, but somewhere along the way I met Kay, and Kay hung in there for quite a while, even while I was drinking, and other such things that I may or may not get into over the course of the video. I just keep on saying podcasts, the videos that I make. Actually, I was making podcasts before, but now, I'm making videos. Potholes. Me trying to make a YouTube video while I'm driving through potholes, a bit on the dangerous side. Anyway, so you got all this time on your hands. Back off, will you? I'm trying to make a YouTube video. You've got all this time in your hands. You've got buckets of money. So let's say $1,300, $1,400. Your rent is about $250. Let's say you're spending about another $150, if that, on food. Like if you're shopping in a supermarket, you wouldn't really be spending. It's just knocking some shops there. I'm keeping in the back of my mind I have to buy a Christmas present for Kay. Anyway, you've got all this money. You've got 18 hours where you're working, and bars stay open 24 hours a day. Now, look at this woman. Yeah, so anyway, straight down to the proverbial rock bottom I went, and along the way there's a heap of faces that I can remember, some fondly, some not so fondly. That again is your typical story. Moving away from drinking, right, because I don't really want to dwell on that too much. That will feature a bit, but I'm trying to speak a little bit more about what's happened since. So let's say that's the fork in the road. When I reached that rock bottom, and again, cliche, I'll talk about the rock bottom in a different video. I went home, I sobered up, I went back to Saigon to try and stay sober, and like a bloody alcoholic cliche, I hit rock bottom again after a relapse. So look, a lot of us alcoholics would say you've got to relapse a couple of times before you figure out what's going on. Then you start to learn the lesson that if you play with fire, you'll go up in flames. That's a cool little market there. Let me see if I can... Yeah, actually, I'll take a little detour and show you the little marketplace. Might even get a video. Might even end up getting a present for Kay. So there's the... No, that's cheap, tacky jewellery. Yeah, so I went back. I went straight back to rock bottom again after a relapse, and this time I started losing the plot for circumstances that are probably fairly well known to some of the people that will be watching this who know who I am, and then for other people who probably drink a lot, you can guess what I'm talking about. Begins with a D, followed with an or, there's a U in there somewhere, and a G and an S comes at the end. I had a bit of a problem with that. And when you have a problem with that, what do you think ends up happening? You also have a problem with starts with P, has an O in it, an L and an I and a C and an E. I'm trying to remember where the hell I park when I come down here. You know what? I might come back here some other time because Kay is expecting me back at home. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll spin around. We'll make a video in there when Kay's with me. She'd go mental if she found out I was shopping by myself, even though I'm just making a YouTube video. Ah, look, I was talking earlier on about there not being too many police cars, and there's one of them right there. Look at these policemen, don't give a shit. I'm fucking making a YouTube video. That guy didn't even look at me. The guy walked driving around. Now, keep in mind, lads, I do have my hands on the brake at all times. I'm not that daft. But if you live here for long enough... Right, lads, I just did a U-turn and got a phone call from Kay. She's giving me an awful bollocking. I had forgotten that we had a race. There's the police coming out in front of me and me on YouTube. It's a great idea. Anyway, yeah, we're supposed to be in a taxi on our way into town, but sure, tried to explain, I got sidetracked while driving through a bloody dump. I'm determined to finish my story. Anyway, I had to get the bloody hell out of Saigon. It was an emergency to end all emergencies, and I managed to, by the hair of my chinny chin chin, escape on a plane. But I couldn't go home because Mum wouldn't let me in the house without... Well, she said I could stay in the house, but if I couldn't drink, and I tried to explain to her that alcoholism doesn't work that way. If you let me into the house and I tell you now that I promise I'm not going to drink alcohol while I'm there, then that's a barefaced lie, because I'm an alcoholic. I can't. So long story short, yeah, got to fucking Spain. Jesus bloody Christ. And Uncle Jared came to meet me. We were both so drunk they wouldn't let us into any hotels. He slept on the beach. We lost phones. He lost his phone. I found it by virtue of someone who had somehow found the phone on the beach, realised that it was a belonging of two of the gobshites that had been walking around the town trying to fight every bloody hotel attendant who wouldn't let us in. The phone made its way back to where I had left my luggage. I had left my luggage in a little coffee shop. When they first met me, they took kindly to me. They allowed me to leave my luggage there, but I ended up on a piss for 3 days. Jared lost his phone. I found it. I contacted the family back at home. Then Jared was missing. We didn't know where Jared was. The only place that we had as a point of reference was an English bar where we had been drinking like two Irish men. We both thought along the same lines, that we didn't have an organised place where we go if we did lose each other, but because we both knew that that was one of the main places where we drank, where else would two drinkers meet if they ended up losing themselves? So I can't remember how long. The police picked me up, and they basically drove me out to the middle of nowhere, opened the back door and said, go and sleep in that bush over there. Jared had given me €50. This is the thing. And I climbed out of the ditch. They threw me into the ditch, basically. I climbed out of the ditch, didn't know where I was because they had locked me in the back of the car. I didn't know how much time had passed by. when I was asking everybody around where the hell I was, they told me the name of some other place. Now, I was convinced that I was in the place that I had flown to. In actual fact, I was in that town, but it took a goddamn fiasco for me to realize where I was. Now, the name of the town escapes me, but after I climbed out of the ditch, I stumbled around for a little while. I knew I had that 50 euro. A bunch of Spanish pricks came along. They were obviously drinking and off their head. Somehow one of the girls managed to convince me that I could go back to a party with them, but they were using, that was a stalling tactic. She was really just trying to get the 50 quid, which I was stupid enough to have been waving around at the time. She got the 50 quid off me, then I had no money. I went back to the ditch and slept for a few hours, and basically when in the emergency mode that I was in, when all else fails, scream for an ambulance. And that was the best that my brain could manage. Somebody was out walking their dog. It was like 7:30 in the morning. I had cut my knee somewhere, and the person that you know, I had said the worst Spanish ever, Augusto Rio, which is the only thing I know from an actual Mano Chao song. Augusto Rio, Augusto Rio coque, me gustas tú. Augusto Rio weed, me gustas tú. Que ore con el corazón. So my entire repertoire of Spanish is taught to me through Mano Chao from the days when I was drinking my head off. Somehow, using the lyrics of Mano Chao songs, I managed to summon an ambulance. And when the ambulance came, they gave me 2 glasses of water. They wouldn't give me a third one for some reason. It's like some type of policy. They gave me a band-aid, and they tried to explain where I was, what the hell I was doing. Basically, they told me that the height of my emergency, was that I needed a pair of shoes. I tried to explain to them that the last thing I needed was shoes. I'd given up on shoes a long time, weeks before I ended up in this situation. Anyway, I listened to them. They sent me off on a charity shop. They gave me a note to say if I get to the charity shop was to give me a pair of shoes. Like, that was what I fucking needed, a pair of shoes. Meanwhile, I had a backpack, and in the backpack was a book which Jared had been using, and on the cover of the book were all these clues that Jared had noted, because Jared had actually lost his car. So when Jared was on his way in to collect me, right, in my emergency, he was also in the middle of his own emergency, which was that he had lost his car in a drunken stupor a week or 2 previous. And what ended up happening was he had a mission of his own, right? I hate the way they do this. Yeah, open that. He had a mission of his own, right? And that was to find the lost car. Now, he had been to the police and he had made a report and all of this jazz. He had a rough idea of where he had left it, and he had rang a number of different people, and all of his clues and all of his leads were written down on the inside of a cover of a novel that he had left in his bag. Now, using that as the only source of information I had, I managed to gather enough information which led me back to the town where I was. I thought that I was 2 or 3 hours outside of it. Murcia, I think, was the name of the town. I was walking around with my bloody kneecap, and there's a parking space. My bloody kneecap, and I remember when I clocked it, when I actually realized. I remember when I realized where I was. I turned a corner and I recognized the beach, and I recognized the bar, and I recognized the supermarket where I bought my first bottle of wine when I arrived into that town. So suddenly everything clicked and I was like, oh my God, I know where I am. The place where I had left my luggage was 5 minutes away from where I was. And I remember being so bloody grateful. I said, thank God my luggage bag is up here in this coffee shop. I went up to the coffee shop. I went into the coffee shop and I tried to explain to them that I had lost my uncle with the only Spanish that I knew, which was the Spanish from songs written by Mano Chao. So, me gustaría mi uncle, me gustas tú. Me gustaría a phone, me gustas tú. Que ora corre corazón. Right, that was enough for them to figure out what was going on. They knew that the people in the shop had been handed the phone. At the time, I thought that they were giving me a phone to use, one of their own. But when they handed me the phone, I started going through it, and I realized pretty quickly that there was actually text messages in it from Jared to my mum. And I was like, fuck me. I'd after made 2 or 3 phone calls on the phone before I realized that that it was, I'll get the next one, I'll get one to myself. Before I realized that it was Jared's phone. So anyway, I had contact with mum, I rang mum, she didn't want to hear it. I'm like, Jesus, I can't find Jared. From there, I managed to get back to the English bar, and in the English bar, after about 2 hours, Jared showed up. Anyway, I think it was another 24 hours of us drinking before Cleena, is it Katrina or Cleena? Fuck, I can't remember her name now. I think it was either Cleena or Katrina. Jared's recently deceased, and she since died from drinking. R.I.P. R.I.P. She came to rescue us because we were in that bad of a state. I'm going to cut this story short. And anyway, you know where it was going from the outset. 2 alcoholics in a house, going crazy together. He kicked me out, chased me down the road with a bloody pickaxe. And from there, yeah, managed to get home. I'll continue this story later. The reason that I'm just coming to the end of the story. So anyway, I was in Spain and Jared had chased me out of his house with a pickaxe. He rang the police on me as well, but that's a different story. Again, with the hair on my chinny chin chin, I managed to get on a plane. I got back from Spain to London. I was stranded in London. It was another debacle. I had to ring mum when she was at a wedding. Another bloody emergency, had no money, couldn't get a connecting flight or missed the connecting flight. Oh no, that was on the way to Spain. Jesus. When I got, no, yeah, but I finished the story about Spain. I got back to Ireland. Mum had that policy, basically you're not allowed in the house if you're drinking. So I basically found myself sleeping in a ditch on more than one occasions. Eventually the day came, I rang Coonmurra, I got on the waiting list. Coonmurra said, we have a bed for you, and everything that I had been building up towards was now on the table. And I contacted Kay.
Who you're so in love with.
Who I was so in love with, and then what happened?
And then you said that I'm going to go in if you promise me that you'll still consider getting back with me. And I told you, let's not talk about our relationship yet. That's not the most important thing. All I want for you is to go into rehab, and I'll promise I'll talk to you whenever you need me. And let's see, because I don't want to be the reason that you're going in. I want that you realize that this is for you and not for our relationship.
And what was my biggest fear?
Your biggest fear. You had so many fears back then, babe. Your biggest fear was, of course, that I would break up with you. Well, that's it. And
well, I think, no, just that 3 months seemed like an eternity.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what the plan was afterwards. And sobriety at the time just seemed so bloody alien, even though I had done it successfully. The first time I was sober for 8 months, and the second time...
9
months. The second time I had been sober for like 2 months. But both of those relapses taught me valuable lessons, I guess, that at this point, I never thought that I would need to go to a rehab.
Yeah.
And
And
then
that
finally I
didn't
realized
work
that
out for you.
3 months of a fucking rehab was exactly what I had to do. And time slows down. Like, you could more or less view it as a prison sentence. So even when I knew that I had to do that, there was still a voice in the back of my head saying, no,
Yeah.
you can still, no word of a lie. I was still thinking about jumping on a plane and heading off to Colombia, because there was opportunities there, like on the internet, no word of a lie. There were deals, like if you have any teaching experience whatsoever, they will pay for your flight, they'll give you free accommodation, and they'll pay you like $150 a month or something. You don't get paid, but in my mind I was like, you're kidding me. All I have to do is show you my CV and I can get on a plane to Colombia. Now I can't remember whether the flight was actually paid or not, but at the time I was still thinking maybe I could get to Colombia. Maybe I don't have to get sober. Funny out, man. Who knows what would have happened if I ended up in Colombia. On the day, finally the day arrived, and the thing is, when I got back to Ireland, I immediately went down to the social welfare office. The social welfare office was processing my application, but for some reason the money didn't come in until the actual day that Coolmurra were expecting me. Now, obviously what I was trying to do then was put off the day for an extra couple of days, just so I could drink some money, or drinks a little bit more, because I had been broke for so long. When this social welfare check came in, I had about €350, and I just wanted so badly to get proper pissed. There was about 10 days there where I was literally getting by like walking up and down the street asking random people, it was some friends, but asking people for the price of a fiver so I could go and buy the cheapest bottle of wine in Tesco's. Mum insisted on driving me to Coolmurra. I couldn't come up with enough of an excuse for her not to be able to drive me there, and so I
Your mom
bit the
can be
bullet.
very convincing, you know.
Huh?
Your mom can
Yeah,
be
but
very
I couldn't exactly turn around and say, Mum, I just got like €350.
Yeah.
I need to go out on the piss.
That's why she knows. She knows
Um,
money.
I can't remember what happened with that €350. Did I put it in an account? I think I didn't even take. I had some of it. I remember going down on my last day and buying 6 cans of beer at like 11 in the morning and drinking
Yeah.
3 cans of cider. I told Mum that I needed a haircut, and I went down and I remember buying 6 cans and drinking like
And before you went in, you
3
poured
cans in a
something
row
out.
before I 3 cans in a row before I went back. Anyway, Mum drove me down. I insisted that we stop in a 7-Eleven to let me have my last drink before I go in. And there was the cheapest, shittiest, well, it wasn't cheap, but it was shit and dry, and there was no ice, and it was in a 7-Eleven, and Mum probably remembered this pretty well, and I was drinking out of a paper cup, and she let me drink a glass, or maybe a glass and a half, and then the bottle was in the boot with my stuff, and in the back of my mind I was like, right, I'll get off, and right at the gate I'll drink that. That'll be my last bottle. That'll be my last drink. I still have that half a bottle in the boot. When Mum pulled up to Coolmurra and I tried to explain to her that I needed to stop and let me get out of the car so I could drink the bottle of wine before I went in, she preliminarily agreed. She agreed at first, but then she just drove straight in and she told me to get out of the car, and everything happened so suddenly. I desperately wanted to drink the bloody wine, but I'm already in the car park.
Yeah.
So I got out, opened the boot, took the bottle of wine.
And threw it.
She was in the front car. I opened the bottle of wine and poured
Yeah.
half a bottle out. She burst into tears and drove out, and I'm left with my luggage on the ground with an empty bottle and a puddle of wine and a statue of the Holy Mary in the corner. And I was like, what in the name of God have I gotten myself into? And
You know, when
that's
we went when we went to Ireland, we should have gone there. You never went to what is his name?
Anyway, that's when the Coolmurra staff came out with one of the bigger heavies that were in there, and just to make sure that I wasn't a threat to anyone inside.
actually did that.
Yeah, they had this big, strong guy come out to make sure that I wasn't a twisted lunatic. There was a fair share of lunatics in there. Anyway, that's it. That's the story. I got into Coonmurra, 3 months passed, and from there I'll pick up the story in another podcast, in another video. Right, we're on our way into town. We're going to try and power this up while we're on our way.
Yeah.
C'est la vie, c'est la vie.